I would like to emphasize that it is a real honor and pleasure to be able to speak to such a wonderful audience at this scientific meeting. I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to appear and congratulate the idea and organization. I must admit, yes, indeed, the general topic of this conference is extremely interesting and actually. We can read in the concept of today's conference that this conference is dedicated to the 25th anniversary to the entry into force of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC, we know, and focusing on the current challenges of international crime justice from the ICC point of view. Looking at the agenda of our conference, I think that practically even aspects related to the functioning of the ICC will be profoundly analyzed. However, my detailed part of the analysis will deal with the issue of the involvement of children in armed conflict and the existence and functioning international crimes. So, in this way, namely, we have two very huge and interesting interways, overlapping issues. The first, children on war. The second, specificity and predestination of the ICC. It is obvious that topic of the children and war can be analyzed from the many sides, from the many point of view, psychological, pedagogical, law. But our conference is devoted to the functioning, specificity, and purpose of the International Criminal Court. Therefore, the activities of the ICC will be the main topic here. I wondered for a long time how to hold this topic, because it is, you know, unusually connection between pure goods, like children, and pure evil, like crimes and war. Children are associated us with goodness, with love, with warmth, future, and sincerity. John Paul II, in his speech in Castel Gandolfo, 25 December 1979, clearly pointed out that the child is a source of hope. It tells parents about the purpose of their life. It represents the fruit of love. It also allows you to think about the future. But, dear friends, in the shadow of these beautiful words appear a lot of terrible, I emphasize terrible, questions like this. Are there any mechanisms that can make a child a monster, abuser, perpetrator? Are there any factors that will allow to use the child's sincerity, pure naivety, the child's will to survive in extremely difficult life condition, to do by this child, yes, horrible things too. And there are effective rules of law and the effective legal body that will quickly and fairly judge those responsible persons for this shameful abuse of children. That is why I decided that the essence of this topic would be presented by the case concerning phenomenon of the child soldier as the one hand victims and the other hand some perpetrators of crimes in the jurisprudence of the International Criminal Court. The basis for this will be very high profile trial of Mr. Dominic Ongwen in the International Criminal Court. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the clarity of my speech, I have divided my speech into segments. What are the segments? Firstly, a general introduction of the problem of the child in the case law of the International Criminal Court on international crimes. Secondly, pointed the history and landmark cases in the jurisprudence of the International Criminal Court. Thirdly, a detailed presentation and analysis of the very interesting case of Dominic Ongwen that I mentioned. Fourthly, summary of the findings and drawing conclusion of the future regarding the topic of the speech. Segment 1, terrible connection, children, war, International Crime Court. Since 2001, the participation of child soldiers has been reported in 21 ongoing and recent armed conflict in almost every region of the world. Millions of children continue to be victims of unimaginable atrocities that deeply shake the conscience of humanity. Inter alia, recognizing the fact the countries of the Rome Conference undertook to establish an international criminal court for the benefit of present and future generations. It should be noted that the rules of the ICC stress the importance of effectively investigating and prosecuting crimes against or concerning children, as well as protecting the rights and interests of children. The commitment to address crimes affecting children can be found in various provisions of the statute, including the enumeration of offenses concerning children, such as enlisting, conscription, and use of children under 15 years of age for active participation in hostilities, forced recruitment and exploitation of children under the age of 15, crimes that disproportionately affect children, such as attacks on educational buildings. Children are also particularly exposed to sexual and gender crimes, which are prohibited by the statute. The statute recognizes children as a person with individual rights, as family members, and as members of multi-generational communities. Exactly, by the other hand, in the war circumstances, it should be noted that the child can be also both a perpetrator and the victim of a crime, but finally then transform in the nature only a perpetrator. This is particularly evident, for example, in the so-called, I hate to describe the third world countries, where victims of crime simultaneously become perpetrators, particularly children who have been enlisted in the army and directly engaged in warfare. An excellent example of such an ambiguous situation inter alia is the case of child soldier. Ladies and gentlemen, segment 2, ICC, the case of children soldier. In the book entitled Children Soldier, Calami Goes to War by Giuseppe Carisi, you can read many shocking descriptions of the participation of children in the war. This is one of many stories. This time is a story of Calami, a Congolese boy who was involved in war. This is completely different world than where we live. We have rules, in this world no rules. We have a supremation of children as goods. In this world, and especially in war circumstances, child is a tool, very sharp tool with kill destination. There are anger, helplessness, desperation, and as we'll see in description in the side, a lot of pain. We must remember that we're recounting about the children without the toys. Replacement. The children hold a rifle in their arms, shoot, kill, and die. The Nobel Peace Prize winner from Africa, Bishop Desmond Tutu, a famous human rights defender, once said that it is immoral that adults want children to fight in their wars. There is no excuse, no convincing reason for arming children. According to the United Nations data, more than 100,000 children under the age of 18 in more than 30 countries are actively involved in armed conflict. We know the term children wars is used to describe the involvement of children in war. More than half of all soldiers in Sierra Leone civil war in 1999 were under the age of 18. I'm recounting about the extremely brutal organization of the Charles Taylor. From 1985 to the present, at least 12,000 children has been kidnapped by the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda. Children are forced to fight with violence and torture. For instance, in Colombia, up to 30% of children are routinely recruited into guerrilla and paramilitary group. In cases of crimes involving children, the ICC Prosecutor Office has been investigating a number of ICC situations since 2003, namely Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Darfur in Sudan, the Central African Republic, Kenya, Libya, Faroe Island, Mali, Burundi, Afghanistan, and the others. The office is also currently conducting preliminary studies in this stage on the situation, for instance, in Bolivia, Colombia, Guinea, Philippines, Venezuela, and has completed 3 other preliminary studies on the situation in Palestine and Nigeria. The first case, the ICC where the victims of the crime were the children, concerned the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the ICC against Thomas Lubanga Dilo. It focused on enlisting and engaged children under the age of 15 and using them to actively participate in hostilities as a child soldier. The court's 2012 guilty verdict was a landmark decision highlighting the need for urgent and concrete action to limit this horrible problem. The final outcome of the case sent a clear message around the world that the use of child soldiers is unacceptable and the perpetrators must be held accountable. Another milestone was the cases against Bosco Ntaganda. In July 2019, judges for the first time in the history of international criminal law and indeed international humanitarian law convicted of sexual violence committed by perpetrators against members of their own armed group. Segment 3, big case of Dominic Ongwen. Moving on to the future part, the issue of child soldiers as victims and perpetrators of international crimes. On example of another key issue, Dominic Ongwen, it's worth briefly presenting the background of this case. Ladies and gentlemen, from a weak boy forcibly conscripted into the Lord's Resistance Army, he quickly grew into adeptly one of the biggest murders in Africa, in the same time the youngest criminal prosecuted the International Criminal Court. In this case, the question is simple, but not easy. Because how to judge a child after them become mature person? How to judge an executioner who is also a victim? While returning to school, teenage Dominic Ongwen in Uganda was kidnapped and recruited by the Lord's Resistance Army, active in Uganda since the 18th. Under the ICC, Ongwen's case dates back to 2005, where arrest warrants were issued for LRA leaders. But in practice, only of them, Dominic Ongwen was brought before the court. It was in 2015. The Ongwen case is an example of, how factors beyond our control can affect our child's future life. Ongwen's biography further argues that the status of victim can evolve over time into perpetrator status, victim-perpetrator status, and simply only perpetrator. In this regard, it is particularly significant that among the 70 charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity formulated against Ongwen, there were also those relating to his personal involvement in the unlawful recruitment of child soldiers into the ranks of the LRA. Ongwen therefore committed the same act that himself had once been a victim of. In this judgment of February 2021, the court found Mr. Ongwen guilty of most of the charges against him, 62 out of 17 charges. The ICC concluded that these crimes were committed in the context of a rebellion by the Lord's Resistance Army against the Ugandan government. It is very important that this so-called argument from the original victim, in example, the fact that Ongwen was in fact the victim and not perpetrators at the beginning, was not accepted by the court. The court also did not find that there were other circumstances in case excluding criminal liability, for example, mental illness. In the nearly 1,100-page verdict, evidence was confirmed presented to prove Ongwen's guilt. The verdict also raises interesting and somewhat alien argument of the supernatural, contratypical natural, such as the role of witchcraft and supernatural forces that Ongwen's recruiters allegedly possessed, thus influencing their subordinates and controlling their action. On December 15, 2022, the Chamber of Appeal confirmed the decision of Probation Chamber 9 on Dominic Ongwen's guilt and sentence. The finding of Ongwen's guilt started the next phase of the proceedings before the ICC, which concerns criminal sanction and liability for damages towards the victims of crimes. 4,095 victims participated in this trial. So in the context of this data, which I have presented here, another important question like this. What are the causes of the phenomenon of child soldier? I think there are. First, the emotional state of children. Children, due to their emotional and psychical immaturity, are easy to target, to manipulate, because they are too young to oppose or understand what is really going on around them. Two, technological progress. Of great importance, also technical progress in the field of the weapons, which can be very easily handled even by a child who is presented with how easy it's to kill a man. Poverty. Children are most likely to become child soldiers if they are poor, separated from the families, displaced from their homes, living in a war zone, or having limited access of education. Overall economic factor. Mainly children join armed groups because of economic or social pressure, or because they believe that, fake belief that the group will provide food or security. And of course, violence. Slowly moving on to conclude, in this time, we already can confirm that children themselves play an active and crucial role in the ICC. Okay, given the irreversible damage causes to children during the conflict, the international community must redouble its efforts to prevent and combat crimes against children. The first good example of this cooperation, for instance, is the adoption of the 25 May 2000 by the United Nations General Assembly of the optional protocol of the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Participation of Children in Armed Conflict. This document has been ratified by the 119 countries around the world. Another good example is that the coalition to stop the use of child soldiers set up by international non-governmental human rights organization. And the final remarks. So, we told ourselves about the tragic phenomenon of child soldier. We told about the International Criminal Court. We told about international crimes. We have even diagnosed, in general, of course, the causes of the creation and duration of this terrible phenomenon of child soldier. But in light of this, therefore, it is necessary finally ask, are there any countermeasures? Are there any ideas to completely eliminate this cruel phenomenon of child soldier? Ladies and gentlemen, we as lawyers immediately have a simple answer. Yes, that's instrument, that our weapon is a law. But it is good or not good. After all, okay, we all have a number of very good solutions, a coherent catalog of legal acts of international law and humanitarian law like this. This is inter alia mentioned Statute of the Rome International Criminal Court. All of this, however, is not enough, because the terrible connection I mentioned between child, war, and international crimes still functioning. In my opinion, general only, we haven't time, the key number one here is efficiency. The effectiveness of law enforcement authorities, including, of course, the ICC. The Dominic Ongwen case mentioned here lasted 8 years, since 2015, and continues, despite clear evidence of the crime. Maybe it is worth mentioning here, for instance, functioning the Special Court for Sierra Leone, which, according to many observers, seems to be more successful than the current ICC. Here it is necessary to accelerate, actively cooperate, and simplify the procedure before the ICC. It's such a way that the victim, citizens in the state, global, quickly receive simple and clearly information. The guilty of this crime has been convicted. And the key number two is educational and expanding public awareness. But, dear friends, this topic is for a completely different and separate lecture. Thank you for your attention.